each Asian country is the reading habits, reading behavior. Actually, Chomanat is also doing on that. But the research or the reading habits or the reading patterns or the reading behaviors of the people in this age, this generation, would be different from the old days, because they don't read the printed materials anymore. They read things from technology, platform, and so diversified. The platform come in many forms. So I think reading behavior, reading patterns would be very interesting research area in our library education. And also, I think what's so-called digital literacy is also coming in. It's been going on for many years already in the United States and of course in Europe. But in this part of the world, digital literacy, it just started. We just kind of think about what sort of level, digital literacy level for specific target groups, and how do we develop digital literacy? How do we help them to have digital literacy, to be survive or to be able to study in that level that they will be, And of course, I'm talking about the content management. And another thing that I saw in this conference, that we starting to have the research that looking on information behaviors and maybe looking on something that we can get the result, the analysis of the result from the data that are tremendously existing in the database or in the data resources. For example, we can analyze information behavior of the people who are using social network by not just doing the basic survey that we usually done in our community, but for now we can use technology, doing research by using data mining, data analytic or text analytic to see the behavior of the people. I remember first time I went to Hawaii and we had a workshop at the Department of Communication, Computer Science and Information Science at University of Hawaii. That was the first time that I saw the research looking at the behavior of the American people on how they think and how they select, how can I say, in the political aspect, that was the time that the second time of the Obama election. That's the first time that I saw. But I see that there are many now that going on. Do you want to?
I was just going to say we were very proud those days.
Yeah. So that's interesting, and we can do that also in many cases. As a university administrator, I think data in our database in the university, lots of them can be analyzed and visualized, for university management or for organizational management. So I see there are still many aspects that for our research, to be considered and so that we can see more paper in the next conference, maybe. Okay, that's just something that I would like to add on. Shall we open for? We have about 30 minutes left. Can we have some comments? Or yes, please, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much, Kultida, Gobinda, and Andrew. What you have said, has stimulated my thinking, and so I couldn't wait to These are very deep questions, very difficult questions. And I think when we have such deep questions, and I follow Andrew, we have to turn to religion. So Andrew was consulting, consulting his knowledge of, Kabbalah, Jewish faith, and various other kinds of faith. So I thought I'll consult my faith, right? And in my faith, it is said that man is created in God's image. Yeah. Right? And I think it's also said or implied that man and women are masters of the earth. Yeah. And I was thinking that, I think that's my answer to the question of this panel. We are also masters of the digital universe. Right? Yeah, we are. Yes. So when we look at Google and all the information that's there, we should be thinking that we are masters of these. These are our tools. These are our animals, that we have to master and make use of them and eat them. and so, as masters of the earth and the digital, universe, I'm thinking, what is our main characteristic? What is our competitor? Who are we, right? What makes us masters, right? And I think we can. And now I turn to biology. What are we called? What species are we? We are Homo sapiens. Thank you. So Homo is human. Sapien is wise. Yeah, wise human. And not only are we Homo sapiens, we are Homo sapiens sapiens, right? We are this is our species. So we are human. We are wise squared. Yeah, wise squared. Yeah, it's very arrogant of us, right? And I was telling myself, we need to be a bit more humble. But I think in this panel, I'm thinking that this really represents what we are. So our main advantage is our thinking. We are wise, thinking, right? Yeah. So we need to develop our thinking. So when we are making use of the digital universe, we should use that to develop our thinking, our insight, our understanding, right? And that sounds like something very common, right? There's nothing deep about it. But as a teacher for 20 years, I find that our students are not thinking, and our education has failed our students. So when I actually, for the first time, I'm teaching undergrad. I used to teach graduate students, and I say, okay, Okay, now I'm teaching undergraduate students, and these are like some of the best students in the country, right? Our school is like quite, takes in the, pretty good students. And I find that they are not thinking because they have been educated in an environment where they have to study for exams, right? They have to understand this, and they do think in terms of they are good at solving problem sets and regurgitation, memorizing, and that's the way they've been trained. So they have stopped thinking, right? So when I'm in class, I tell them, if I ask them a question, and then they will search Google, and I say, no, don't search Google, but they will still, right? And then they'll give me the answer, right? I say, okay, that's Google's answer, right? There's answer from the digital universe. So what's your answer, right? So I'm trying to now, whatever course I teach, I tell the students that I'm just teaching thinking. There's a big emphasis on thinking. And thinking about, how do you, you have all these answers here, but how do you develop your own understanding, right? That's different from everything else, So because whatever definition there is on Google is made by somebody, and they have some motives for making those definitions. So when you read whatever you need to use, what's this? Critical thinking, right? To understand where is the author coming from. It's not, whatever you see in the digital world, it's not facts. It's somebody has some political motive to put it there. There's some contextual. You need to understand that. And then you need to relate it to your own context and develop your own understanding. So teaching my students about authorial voice. I say that when you're writing essays or writing answers in the exam, you shouldn't just give me the facts, the truth. Tell me what you think, You should give me, when you're writing, it should reflect your intellectual personality, your understanding, your context, and who you are, okay? And I think that brings us to diversity. I'm trying to tell my students that each of them needs to develop their own personal understanding of whatever it is that I'm teaching. And when they go out to the job market and when they interview, and right, this semester I'm teaching data mining, right? So if your boss asks you, what is data mining? And if you say, let me think back, what did my lecturer say? I said, you have lost your job. You have lost the job. You need to give the data mining, not from Google or correct, what is data mining to you, right? You have to develop this. So what shall we do as librarians, okay? I think we need to develop our thinking. And within thinking, okay, there are different aspects to thinking. I think one important aspect of thinking is information integration, right? We have all this information on Google, right? Google cannot integrate information, So when you get all this information, you need to take it and form your own understanding, your grasp. You need to integrate all this information. You need to synthesize, okay? And then you should present this to communicate this in writing or in speaking, okay? And I've spoken too long. But I just want to tell you about something I just learned from our judges in Singapore. I just made a presentation on data mining at a legal conference, okay? And so there were lots of judges, and my session was on sentencing. How do you decide whether to send somebody to 1 year jail, 15 months, and so on, right? And my job, I was asked to do a small study and show how to predict somebody's jail sentence. And some of the judges came to me and said, no, judges don't do it this way, right? First, they are not numerate, most of them. They use this thing called intuitive synthesis. And I thought, wow, that's a great term, right? Intuitive synthesis, right? So now I go back to class and say that I want to see in your side, I don't want to see all these facts. And when you're doing your research result, I don't want to see lots of facts. I want you to have this, synthesize all this into your intuitive synthesis. I used to call that gut feeling, right? And present that in your thesis. And whatever it is, when I look at student present research, I'm trying to see this intuitive synthesis and how it's reflected in the presentation. And I think that's what librarians should be focused on integrating information into knowledge and helping other users to do this intuitive synthesis. Thank you for bearing with me.
Was that a question?
No, just a comment.
Yes, I agree, Chris. I think in this digital world, because information and data is spread everywhere, I think it is our role to integrate them and link them to help people make their decision. And whether they choose to make a decision purely based on data or mix that with their intuition. So you know that there are two types of judgments. One is kind of more data driven, and the other one is intuitive. But our role as an information professional would be to ensure that people in whichever field they have access to all and this is where the important point, integrated data and information. And I'm looking onto the UN Sustainable Development Goals, on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure many of you have seen this, and you can find it on the UN and many other sites. Coming back to the question of living happily, it summarizes in 3 words. It says the United Nations have come up with a set of goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all. Now, you can expand all of these to cover all the sustainable development goals. So if we can contribute to ending global poverty, protecting the planet, and ensure prosperity for all, then we will be successful in our profession.
That's very big,
Yes.
anticipation, very big.
And we can do that, and this is what we have heard. I'm sorry to come back to this comment. If you look at the papers that have been presented here, and also if you kind of analyze and synthesize our keynote speakers, you'd see that, and this is what my sort of point is. Individually, we are doing a lot of things. We need to connect the dots, and then we can see the bigger picture. You have said that there is a lot of research here in Thailand, for example, on cultural heritage, but these are all isolated work. There's a lot of effort, resources, thinking, knowledge that has gone in there. Connect the dots and you can see the bigger picture, and that's where you can make the bigger impact.
So, Andrew, going to say something?
Yeah, so between that wonderful response and this amazing question, are you sure you're not Jewish? You have a lot of, I'm not sure about the masters of the universe part and don't want to get into a theological discussion, but I think just to echo a few things and respond, I agree that I think one of the problems is a lot of our communities don't look at each other in terms of models. And so, again, in my students in Hawaii, I keep telling them that it's so important to look at other indigenous models for knowledge systems, for digital libraries, for portals. And then we, as last keynote, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I think that this is all kind of taking us to a better place. I think what Gobinda was talking about with the three summary points of the United Nations Sustainable Goals, actually it kind of relates to a Jewish concept called Tikkun Olam, which is the idea is to make the world a better place. And I think part of our challenge as educators is that how can we do that within our mission of getting tenure, research, service. So I suppose we could call this service. But I think we also should say that it's part of education, because I would agree with your comment that to some extent we failed. And I think that part of that is that we get so narrow about our topic, whatever we're teaching, that our students don't feel the connection between what's happening in the world and their own sort of content, which is why some of my students get frustrated at times, but because they have a syllabus, and then suddenly today I said, well, you have what's on the paper that we're supposed to be talking about, but did you read the paper this morning? And I look at the class and they say, oh, no. And then they're kind of joking, oh, that's right, well, you don't look at newspapers. Okay, well, did you look at some of the news portal sites today? And a few people have heard the stories, or maybe they watched what was on TV and the news. But I think it's always really important for us as information educators to try to be able to respond to what's happening somewhere and to think, how is, it's the United Nations conference, how is that related to what we're teaching? How is that related to what we need to do in order to kind of encourage students to develop these kind of critical learning skills, as you said, and to model them ourselves. I think that part of that is to kind of say that some of these things are more important than some of the things that we need to check off on a syllabus, or the idea of a test that you have to regurgitate. I love, another thing that we can do as teachers, I don't mean to say that Judaism has all of the answers. I'm not religious. I'm using this as an example, but I think that the Jewish way of teaching, if you ever look at any materials, is that you look at a text and they say, well, Rabbi so-and-so feels this, but another rabbi disagreed, and then there's a third rabbi who thought, well, actually the real point of that, it's so different from how we usually teach, especially in LIS. We say, this is the rule of this, and we never deal with exceptions. And I think that we need to look much more critically. We need to kind of always keep it relevant to what's happening in politics, what's happening in business. We heard about the disruptive force that all of these places, Google, Alphabet, all of these different huge corporations, we talk about this is the information time, and do we have a role in this? Well, part of it is how much can we lobby? How much can we get our students to try to make the connections? How much do we teach about community engagement? And we can do all of these things in class, but then it also gets down to Kultida's last question, which is, how is that going to work when they get a job? And so like at the University of Hawaii, we spend a lot of time talking about community engagement, but my big fear is that there are no, for example, like ethnic archives that pay salaries, or one or two. And so a majority of people need to be working in a public library or university, and so this is kind of plus. So I think that we need to kind of, this is always the balance, because we're in a professional school, and at the end, we want our students to be able to get a job, right? So unfortunately, few people can sustain, that's a different kind of sustainability, economic sustainability, to do that on their own. But, how can we make this kind of work? So again, Jushta, I'll leave you with more questions than answers. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Any more comments or questions? Okay, that. Yeah, you may want to talk about community engagement. I think it's interesting too. Yeah.
Thank you for your nice discussion. I'm from Korea. It's my first time to participate in this kind of the conference, in the Asian Pacific region. And then I think the region, Asia Pacific region, is really diverse. Sometimes it's very prospective area and very interesting area, which I live. And then I think, in my think, there's a lot of, how can I say, agenda or scholarly things we have to share each other or the understanding better. Because we work in the field of the same field, librarian as a librarianship. So I would like to ask same question to each professor. How can I say, to enhance our librarianship or professionalship in the library and information science, especially in the Pacific Asian region, which scholarly area or which agenda we have to develop primarily? Yeah, I would like to ask your, the personal kind of question, because your subject is a little different, but your thinking or your view, I'm really curious about that. Thank you.
Okay, so well thank you for your question. I think that it's actually the challenge for all of us to think about how can we integrate this into all of our research. So if you're teaching information literacy, then we might want to think about, well, for example, we often, in the United States, we teach the New York Times as the most objective kind of source, but we say, well, whose voice does that represent, or whose voices aren't included? So since I'm in Hawaii, it's quite far from New York, and we say, like, our native Hawaiian voices, our Asian American voices included. Being focused in Korea, I would think about Korean Americans, I would think about the Korean diaspora all over the world, think about Korean zainichi in Japan, and what are the information needs that they have? How do we think about creating metadata, and how do we think about, that's going to try to allow people to access different kinds of information? How can you cooperate with like Korean schools in Japan, for example, that and to try to build these kinds of networks, and also, like, again, with index. I mean, almost, and again, it's hard for me to answer, because, like, if we look at what are all the different fields within LIS, there's an ethnic aspect that should be included within all of them. And I think that oftentimes we consider our country homogeneous, but actually when you look at Korea now, you have larger numbers of immigrants, for example, or a lot of now, I think, particularly as wives that have come from China and from Vietnam that are moving into Korea. There are also others that new immigrants, that how are they receiving in terms of public library service? Are they being able to access card catalogs? Are libraries and information services providing diverse kind of content? I mean, so again, there are all of these kinds of questions as we become more of a global society. It's so I So you're saying, how can we network better as information?
I mean, the Asian Pacific region, usually in the librarian society, it's kind of it has been considered as a minority. But these days, in this region, there's so many, librarian and then so many things, public policy things in that region. So, but each country have a diverse, level of the development. But in the name of the locality, maybe we have to develop some kind of common agenda, because there are lots of things we have to do. So what I'm curious about is the things we have to develop each other or collaborate each other. I mean, in the special region, the Asian Pacific region. That's what I'm curious about that.
So I think some other people in the audience might be able to answer, but I know that, like for example, IFLA, there in terms of public librarians and academic librarians who come together, there's ethnic materials, special interest group where a lot of people from Asia Pacific, but obviously conferences like this, obviously are a chance, especially for educators and graduate students. And I think, I know, for example, like the Korea Library Association and the Japan Library Association sent representatives to each other's conference and tried to have more dialogue. Someone else want to add more about other things within the region?
I think I can add 1 or 2 points, but then I'll point it to someone else. Now, you have asked a very, very important question, and I was part of the community development in Asia Pacific, and that's why we formed CSAP, the Asia Pacific High School, so that we can discuss the common issues and at least build a community around some of the common issues and thereby create a critical mass. Now, we had a kind of an ambitious plan, and I since moved from Asia Pacific and then moved to Europe.